Hey everybody, welcome to the Legacy Podcast. My name's Bill Dupenthaler.
And I'm Mike Conan, and this is a podcast for disciples who want to make disciples.
All right, guys. Hey, we're back. It's Bill and Mike.
Yeah.
And it's, gosh, was it the end of May or middle of May or something like that?
I can't even remember that far back, Bill. It seems like another century ago.
I know, but we are so glad to be back on the podcast, and we've got a bunch of really fun stuff that we're talking about for this fall and planning, but just real quick, just to kind of catch up, Mike, tell us a little bit about the last 3 or 4 months. How was your summer?
The summer was pretty crazy and great. At the same time, we had, I would call it the summer sports, and with a little vacation mixed in there.
You're at that stage in life, aren't you?
Yeah, a lot of great family time, a lot of baseball tournaments, daughter doing a long-term gymnastics drive, so that's now part of our daily routine. And then we took a great vacation, though, to Palm Springs and spent a couple of weeks there. I got to spend a week with my oldest son for his senior trip. He decided that he wanted to spend it with me golfing in the Palm Springs. So it was awesome. And so we golf, and then we spent a couple of days in Bible study and just talking about life, the Lord. It was a good summer in many ways, and a pretty good fall too. If you're listening here in the Washington area, it seems like summer still. We went to our lake yesterday, not our lake, but our friend's cabin, and we couldn't believe it. It's October. We're hanging out at the lake. The kids are swimming in the water. It was something. It's been great. But glad to get back in the fall and the routine and all that stuff.
Yeah. Too. Oh yeah, for sure. We were at the pumpkin patch on this week. I forget if it was Saturday or Sunday, but it's like between 75 and 80 and
exactly.
Funny, all these people, they're all dressed up for the pumpkin patch. They're wearing these, flannel shirts and things like that, and they're just sweating and just dying, but it was great. But we're thankful for the extended summer. We had a great summer too that was really highlighted by the chance that we had to go back to France. Where we had, and most of you have heard me talk about this before, but we had a chance to live in Lyon, France for 4 years, a few years ago now, and just amazing time living there, and then we hadn't been back to visit since 2018, because of COVID and all those kinds of things, and so we had a very generous person that helped make that happen for us to be able to go back, and we really viewed this as like an Apostle Paul missionary journey, going back to all the places where he had visited and where he had ministered and that kind of thing, and that's what we did, and
so awesome.
Oh my gosh, it was so cool, and I won't, but I could talk about it for the next half an hour. But if you ever want to hear more about that, let me know, and I'd love to share with you some of the things that God did. But it was just really cool reconnecting with people and seeing God, just make super cool connections and getting people back with Jesus and with each other, and certainly just in reconnecting with us and that kind of stuff. And so it was amazing. And we came back and it was still summer, and we couldn't believe it.
Well, I loved getting your updates, and when you came back, you seemed so renewed and refreshed.
Yeah.
It's amazing how as you're renewing and refreshing others, how you yourself can find that.
Yeah.
As well.
And I mentioned this to Mike too when we were talking about this. It being on this trip and seeing all these people that we had been with and ministered with and to, it really reminded me why we started Legacy in the first place.
Yeah.
And just this whole idea of there's just this incredible need out there, because so many people are not really connected with God, and they're not really connected with each other, and they're certainly not really connected with the Great Commission and going out and making disciples. And so it was just a great reminder of why we do what we do.
Yeah, I bet that was that moment when you're seeing it right in front of you, and it is something that can really grab hold of your heart and your mind, I think, right?
Yeah, yeah. So right near the end of the trip, and even when we first got back, which was just like a couple of weeks ago, and I was reflecting on our time, I started thinking about this passage in Hebrews chapter 10, and it's got a bunch of phrases that begin with the two words "let us," not lettuce, like lettuce and tomatoes, but let us do this, let us do that.
Yeah.
And in fact, I don't know if I ever told you this, back when we were first thinking about this concept of our organization, I actually from this passage, I actually toyed with the idea of, let's call it, letus.org or something like that. We
Nice.
decided we went against that.
Probably a good call to stick with our true legacy.
Yeah, I know. But
better
anyways, but I always love this passage, and as it describes really in a lot of ways what we see in people who are missing out, and what we see in people who are really connected to the Lord. But would you read that passage for us, Mike, and then we can,
Sure.
we'll kind of introduce kind of what we're thinking about for today.
So this is from Hebrews chapter 10, and it follows one of the great apostasy passages where it talks about people turning their back on their faith and going a different direction. And so it's kind of this wonderful little contrast there where the apostle Paul says, that is not who we are. We are people who are steadfast. And this is what he says. This is 22 through 25. Let us draw near to God with the sincere hearts and with the full assurance that faith brings, having our hearts sprinkled to cleanse us from a guilty conscience and having our bodies washed with pure water. And let us hold unswervingly to the hope we profess, for he who promised is faithful. And let us consider how we may spur one another on towards love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. Hebrews 10, 22 through 25.
Perfect. You're really good at that.
Oh, thanks.
All those years of pastoring, and Mike's just like, seriously, it's awesome. So that first part of that passage we're going to focus on a little bit today. Just this idea of let us draw near to God, and at first glance that seems like kind of a sort of a basic deal. Like, well, yeah, draw near to God. Isn't that kind of the idea? We're Christians, we draw near to God. But the crazy thing is, as we have. And certainly during my time in Europe and even since I've been back and seems like most of the conversations we have with people,
Yeah.
Well, tell me about, how things are going between you and the Lord, and tell me about your faith journey and that kind of thing. It seems like there's not a lot of people that are really drawing near to God.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. I think it's a struggle. I think it's a real struggle for people.
Yeah. There's a little story in the book of Acts about a little time when Paul he's out doing his thing, he's traveling around, and he gets to this one little town, and they have a gathering in the evening, and Paul's gonna kind of preach, and I imagine he's giving a report on all the things that he'd been doing, and to me, I would think it would have been a fascinating, night. But the cool thing about the Bible, one of the many cool things about the Bible is it's very real. It's
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like a lot of the stories in there, they're not just like sort of whitewashed and glossing over details of things. I mean, it tells it really like it is. And the writer of the book of Acts, Luke, he does mention that Paul was kind of droning on for a long time.
Going on and on, late into the night. I think it's how that most translations have it. It's kind of funny.
Yeah. He kept talking. So there's there's a guy named Eutychus. And Eutychus is one of those guys that shows up at the meeting and just kind of finds a place in the back. And in this case, he had found an open window, and he was just kind of sitting there in the window, listening to Paul going on and on and on. And we won't spend too much time on the passage, but the bottom line is, as Paul goes on and on, Eutychus is slipping deeper and deeper into one of these kind of deals. We've all been there, right?
He was closing his eyes, falling asleep, for those of you who are listening, yes.
Yes, thank you. You mean you couldn't see that through the microphone? And anyways, my eyes are closed. And anyway, it says that Eutychus falls asleep, and he actually falls out the window, and it says he died. He broke his neck or something, and this isn't really the whole main point of the story, but Paul goes out, prays for him. He's miraculously healed. They bring Eutychus back up, and they continue the meeting. And I think he went on for the rest of the night.
Well, that's what I tell people all the time. People say, "Oh, Mike, your sermons are too long or they're too boring." I'm like, I haven't killed anybody.
Yeah.
I had a couple of people that got hauled off in ambulances, but they didn't die. So,
Yeah, exactly.
I'm on the Apostle Paul. I didn't kill anybody.
But the thing I like about that story, and the reason I mention it, is it's this idea of drawing near. And if you don't want to fall asleep in a meeting, what do? You sit in front.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, if you want to have a conversation with somebody, and heck, I've fallen asleep in conversations before. If there's a bunch of people in a room and it's warm and you're sitting there and you get sleepier and sleepier. But if you're right up in front and you're engaged in the conversation, you don't fall asleep.
Yep. Well, they called it, when I was in school, they called it the magic T. So the front row of the classroom and then the center row of the classroom is where 90+% of the A's come.
Really?
Yeah. And they call it the magic T. So the people who sit in those spots tend to be the ones who can pay the closest attention, get the best grades. And so I've always tried to encourage my kids to sit in the magic T, not in the back corner.
Like Eutychus.
Yeah. And at church, if I had my way, I'd sit in the center of the T every week.
Yeah.
Because I'm just got so much ADD, I think, or something. I get so easily distracted that if I'm in the middle of the magic T, it always goes better for me.
Yeah.
In general, because you can't do anything but pay attention.
Right. Right.
And if I can find anything else to do, I will. Longer story short.
Yeah. So anyway, the idea of drawing near is a principle that works in life and certainly in meetings, especially when somebody drones on and on and on. But this idea, if you want to draw near to God, you actually have to draw near to God. It needs to be something that is really intentional. And in other words, it's not going to just happen. I think people, I don't know what people think, but I guess they just think, well, I decided to follow Jesus, back in the day, and I go to church most of the time, and so, it just kind of is what it is. And I don't really, if you ask me, I don't really feel God's presence a whole lot. I don't really hear God speak to me. I don't really see miracles and that kind of stuff. I suppose it happens, but not for me.
I think that would be what most people would say.
Yeah.
I think most people would say that they have never had an experience where they've drawn near to God.
Yeah.
As we've been thinking about this, I think that is what most people would say is, I've never had an experience where I've drawn near to God.
Yeah.
Now, having said that, in the church, I hope that the number is a lot higher. Obviously, as people are professing followers of Christ, I hope that each of them has had some sort of an experience where they've drawn near to God. But I'm guessing that they'd have to hit the Wayback Machine button and draw on their college years or 20s.
Yeah.
And it would not be a normal occurrence for a lot of folks.
Yeah.
Of course, there are folks who it is, and those folks tend to stand out, I think.
Yeah. For sure. And you talk about kind of going way back. I remember the first time that I really truly drew near to God. I was in 8th grade or something like that, I think, and we went to this little camp. And I went through the whole week of the camp, and it was fine. It was a Christian camp, and and we're not talking about, do you believe in God? Or we're not talking about like, are you a Christian? We're talking about, are you drawing near to God and really have this intimate personal relationship with Jesus like we talk about? And they were talking about that this week at camp for me. And I remember that last night I was just kind of in my bunk, kind of bedtime and lights are out. And I was just thinking about everything. And I remember still to this day praying this prayer, Lord, I want to know you and be close to you like these people are talking about here, because I've always believed in you. I've gone to church, all that kind of stuff, but I've never really experienced you and had this intimate, close relationship with you like they're talking about. And I want to have that, Lord. And I remember praying that prayer and really it changed my life. And it was, and I didn't consider it at the time, but as I look back, I would say that was the time when I really began my relationship with Jesus.
I had a similar experience when I read The Cross and the Switchblade by David Wilkerson. I think it was in college. I don't remember when, but he had talked about, as a pastor, he was struggling to draw near to God. And so he had challenged the Lord and said, I think the reason I'm not drawing near to you is I'm watching too much TV, but I love it so much. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'll tell you what, God. So he makes this deal with God and says, I'll sell my TV. I'm going to put it up. I don't know. It was a long time ago. So it was in the want ads in the paper.
Yeah.
And he said, as soon as the paper gets distributed, I'm going to give you 2 hours, something along those lines. And I'm going to put a price on there that I know is over what it's worth, and somebody has to pay me the full price. He does this whole thing where it's almost impossible for this TV to get sold on a Sunday morning too. So he's at church or whatever. And there were a lot of factors. Anyway, he sells the TV in a remarkable quick amount of time like that. Somebody buys it, comes and gets it, pays him cash for it. And then he devotes that time that he was watching television to being in solitude. And that's when God started working on him. And then the long story short is he ends up being called to go up to Brooklyn, and his church becomes the Brooklyn Tabernacle. He's the one who starts all this, stuff related to Celebrate Recovery, all these, his disciples. Right. And even Alpha is in some ways connected with Nicky Cruz, and who was a disciple. And all of it started with this guy who recognized as a pastor he was struggling to draw near. And I remember preaching a sermon in Chapel Hill, one of the first sermons I'd ever preached. And I used that example of how it just really challenged me. And as I saw in the scriptures, people who were willing to draw near to God, they always had to sacrifice.
Yeah.
Something that they loved to do it, because those are the things that were holding them back. And it got me thinking about, we're sitting in a 50s diner here, and there's actually a phone on the side over there. There's like an old rotary phone. And I was thinking about, and we were talking about what's a good analogy for what is it like for us to connect with God today. And I think the best analogy is that God is always calling us. Like he's never up there waiting. Gosh, I just hope Bill will call. He's never bored sitting on his hands. It seems to me like God is always calling us. But in the old days, and this isn't true anymore, so if you don't have an old phone, you won't be able to relate, because now it just goes straight to voicemail. But before, you get a busy signal. And so if God's trying to call you, trying to reach you, and you're just busy all the time, and you're talking to somebody else, you're doing something else, it hurts your opportunity to draw near to the Lord. He's always wanting to draw near to us, and he's constantly reaching out to us, no much more so than in Christ on the cross. And yet we are the ones who busy ourselves with the things of this world, as Jesus would say.
Yeah. Well, and that's, as we were chatting, as we were preparing for this, we were talking about, well, why don't people draw near to God? Because isn't that kind of a big deal?
Yeah.
Isn't that what it's about, is this relationship with God and how personal Jesus is and that kind of thing? And I think it's exactly right. And again, I hadn't thought about that. There is no such thing as a busy signal anymore.
Yeah, it's straight to voicemail now.
Yeah. It's just like, it goes to voicemail. But and no one listens to their voicemails either anymore. So
I do, but I know you don't.
yeah, you're old school. I don't listen to my voice. You want to? I can see that you called, and if I know you, I'll call you back. Okay. If I don't know you, I'm not calling you back. I'm sorry.
You listen once in a while.
I actually don't. Don't leave me a voicemail because I don't listen to them. I'm sorry. But anyways, but yeah, I think people don't draw near to God. It's not so much because they don't want to or don't think it would be a great thing, but we're just so dang busy all the time, and we're just distracted, and we're just doing our thing, and even if you're having time, like for me, I spend time in the mornings typically, to read my Bible and pray, having a quiet time, and but even then, it's like my phone's sitting right there. There's things going on outside, oh, who's that pulling up? Oh, there's an Amazon delivery. I mean, there's just like constantly distractions.
Well, I have 4 kids here, so it's even more so.
Yeah.
But yeah, totally agree. Totally agree.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had one of my professors who was a professor of spirituality. And
Wow, that's quite a title.
Well, and missions. He was spirituality and missions. It's really interesting. Yeah. Great guy. And a lot of great teaching. He recommended everyone have a daily delay, a weekly withdrawal, and a regular retreat as our habit for drawing near to the Lord. So a daily delay would be,
good job using that alliteration, by the way.
Thank you. We were just talking about alliteration and how I never remember it, and yet,
and then you come up with this alliteration.
No, that's why I remember this from so long ago because he used an alliteration. Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
Daily delay, which is maybe it's 20 minutes, maybe it's a half hour, but a weekly withdrawal, which is a significantly bigger chunk of time, and maybe that would partially include your going to worship, and then a regular retreat, which is obviously where you're spending a day or two of being in the presence of the Lord. And especially for pastors, that was the challenge that was put out to us. And it's still, I think, a great pattern. And something we've tried to create here too. In fact, if you're a man listening to this, we have a great opportunity coming up in the spring in April where we're going to do a regular retreat. And
there you go.
It's going to be good.
Yeah. No, I remember over the years when I was working with Young Life, at different times I'd had different supervisors that used to make us have build into our schedule one day away per month it's
a great idea.
Just to be quiet, leave your phone in the car, go someplace with no distractions and just listen, And I think that's why people don't really hear God's voice very often, or see God do incredible things very often, because I know for sure that God is always at work, and he's ready and he's willing and he is working in the world, but so often we don't experience it because we aren't listening, we aren't taking the time, and that kind of thing. And so we think about this verse, draw near to God with a sincere heart. And when I thought about that with a sincere heart, I thought about this isn't a formula that we're saying, okay, so all you got to do is just draw near to God, and then that's what you got to do. No, it's not a formula. You have to really be intentional about setting aside time, and it's how bad do you want it?
Yeah, well, and as you're thinking about a sincere heart, I don't know if anybody starts off with a sincere heart. Honestly, most of the time when we're drawing near to God, our heart is cold. If we're being just brutally honest, that's the way it is. We want to do something else, and yet, as the longer that we're with the Lord, He warms our heart.
Yeah,
and so I think that our heart becomes more sincere over time, but maybe that sincereness comes in that I know I want to meet with the Lord, even though I don't feel it right now. I know that's what I want.
Yeah.
And it's that being the person who lives for the greater purpose rather than what's right in front of you all the time.
Yeah. No, that's a great point too. I because if it's just well, are you really feeling it? Okay, I'm really feeling it now, so I'm gonna go draw near to God. No, you're right. It's probably most of the time you're not feeling it. But just to make the intentional choice to
just pick up the phone.
Yeah, pick up the phone because he's calling. And we were looking at that verse in James 4:8, I think it was, that Well, so Mike, for those of you that are listening, Mike pointed down at our notes, but I'm not wearing my glasses, so I would have to put my glasses on and look down at the notes.
It is 4:8, yes.
Yeah. Thank you. But the verse says, "Draw near to God, and He will draw near to you," which seems to kind of imply that we have to take the first step. But I think it's pretty much that God's drawing near to us as well.
That works both ways.
It works both ways.
I mean, if you think about it, if God is always reaching out to you, you're the one who determines whether you draw near to him or not.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it isn't that you're going to call God and he's going to pick up the phone maybe if he's got time.
Right.
It doesn't, it's quite the opposite.
Yeah.
Where as soon as you pick up the phone, the Lord he's
Yeah.
there. So it's,
And the other part of that verse was with the full assurance of faith. And I thought you made a really good point when we were chatting about this, is I think people need to have that assurance of faith.
Well, and it even goes on to say, having our hearts sprinkled to cleanse us from a guilty conscience and having our bodies washed with pure water. And then the passage you referenced, the second part of that is, draw near to God and he will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded.
Yeah.
So as you think about it, maybe the main reason we don't draw near to God is the sin that is in us. The things that we would rather hold on to than to experience his presence. And I know that I have those things. And I can think of the binging shows. I can think of playing on my phone. I can think of sports, probably is the highest one, of things that I would rather be doing. And so it is that moment where you just think, oh man, that's sin. That's treasuring those things more than the Lord. And it's that trust that we can turn to the Lord and he can forgive us for those things. And sometimes I think that sin does keep us away. Like we purposely stay away because we know God's going to change us.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Yeah. So just to wrap things up then, we want to encourage you guys to be intentional about drawing near to God. And by the way, we're encouraging each other. I mean, I'm getting encouraged just as we're thinking about this and talking about it. I'm thinking, man, I need to start building those little days away into my schedule. And a lot of times, I mean, people don't have time all the time to do that, but even just being really intentional about being focused in your times with the Lord, even.
I would say everyone has the time. It's a choice.
It is a choice. You're right.
I mean, it's a choice.
Yeah.
And especially, it's a difficult choice because it's something that's uncertain for something that is certain.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys for listening. And I too feel encouraged, and I hope that you're encouraged by this. And know this too. I think the big part of this story in these verses is that, in fact, if we would have done the other one in Hebrews, it talks about, let us boldly approach the throne of grace that we may receive grace. Yeah. And I think this goes hand in hand with that.
Yeah.
Because we all need grace, and nobody's got this down to a T. I mean, even David Wilkerson, he writes about his struggles all the time too. And I can tell you, and Bill can tell you our own struggles with these things. But I can tell you when we're at our best is when we are doing that.
Yeah.
That time with the Lord daily, that time with the Lord weekly, and then that time with the Lord on a regular, even more intentional retreat. It's pretty powerful. You can learn more about us and our ministry at ourtruelegacy.com. We have, like I mentioned earlier, we have a men's retreat coming up in April, and you can find out more about the specific dates there and information. We'd love to have you come and join us. It's going to be one of those great times. We've also got our legacy leaders kicking off in the next week. If you're listening to this podcast live and current, we'd love to have you join us and learn how to become a disciple who makes disciples. And as always, we'd love for you to pray for our ministry. We love and want to hear and sense God's presence and power working in and through us. We believe in prayer. We hope you would take a moment and pray for our ministry. And then as you're praying, would you pray for us and our financial needs? We'd appreciate that too. And if you're willing to make a donation, just jump right back on ourtruelegacy.com and give a donation. We'd love to have that happen. But anyway, until then, we're just thankful for you, thankful for listening.
Yep.
And now that we're back, if you would take a moment and share this with a friend and get them inspired, we would love that. It's going to be a great series, the next 5, and then we got another series after that on building relationships. That's going to be great. So it's going to be a great fall into winter. So share and we would really appreciate it. But until then, let us be committed to be people who are disciples who make disciples.
Amen.